The film opens in 1947 with Andy Dufresne, a quiet, intelligent banker, standing trial for the murder of his wife and her lover. Andy insists he is innocent, but the evidence is circumstantial and heavy against him. The jury finds him guilty, and he is sentenced to consecutive life terms at Shawshank State Penitentiary, a brutal prison in Maine. When Andy arrives at Shawshank, he is stripped of his identity and dignity like every other inmate. The guards, led by Captain Hadley, are violent and corrupt, while the prison is run by the cold, religious warden Samuel Norton, who preaches the Bible while practicing cruelty. Andy keeps to himself, drawing attention because of his calmness in a place ruled by fear. Andy eventually befriends Ellis Red Redding, a longtime inmate known as the man who can get things inside prison for a price. Red narrates the story and becomes Andy's closest ally. Life in Shawshank is harsh, especially due to a group of inmates called the Sisters, who repeatedly assault Andy. For years, Andy endures abuse in silence. Andy's intelligence becomes his shield. While working on a prison roof, he overhears Captain Hadley complaining about an inheritance being eaten up by taxes. Andy takes a massive risk and offers him financial advice. The plan works, saving Hadley money. In return, Andy earns protection from the guards, and the assaults stop. From that moment, Andy becomes valuable. Over time, Andy begins helping guards and prison staff with taxes, legal paperwork, and finances. Warden Norton uses Andy's skills to launder money through a fake identity named Randall Stevens. Andy is trapped useful, but never free. Andy pushes for something bigger: hope. He rebuilds the prison library, writing letters for years until the state sends books and funds. One day, Andy locks himself in the warden's office and plays an opera record over the prison loudspeakers. For a brief moment, the inmates feel free. Andy is punished with solitary confinement, but he comes out smiling because hope lived inside him. Years later, a young inmate named Tommy arrives and reveals shocking information. He once shared a cell with a criminal who confessed to committing the same murder Andy was convicted for. Andy finally has a chance at freedom, but when Andy tells the warden, Norton refuses. Freeing Andy would expose his corruption. Instead, the warden has Tommy murdered and throws Andy into solitary confinement again. After his release from solitary, Andy seems broken. He gives Red a strange request. If Red is ever released, he must visit a specific hayfield near Buxton. Red is unsettled, fearing Andy may harm himself. The next morning, Andy is gone. The guards discover Andy's cell empty. In a moment of fury, the warden throws a stone at a poster on Andy's while revealing a tunnel behind it. For 19 years, Andy secretly dug through the prison wall using a tiny rock hammer, hiding the hole behind posters. That night, Andy escaped through a sewage pipe and emerged into freedom during a thunderstorm. Andy steals the warden's dirty money using the fake identity, exposes the corruption to the press, and disappears. The guards are arrested, Captain Hadley is taken away in chains, and Warden Norton commits suicide as police arrive. Red eventually earns parole after decades inside. Struggling with freedom at first, he remembers Andy's words about hope. He travels to Buxton, finds the hidden money Andy left for him, and follows Andy's final invitation. The film ends in Zihuatanejo, Mexico, where Red finds Andy repairing a boat by the ocean. The two friends reunite in peace, free at last. As the years pass inside Shawshank, Andy Dufresne becomes something unusual in prison, a man who does not let the place define him. While most inmates grow bitter or broken, Andy grows patient, silent, observant. He understands that survival in Shawshank is not about strength, but about usefulness. Andy begins helping guards with tax forms, appeals, and legal letters. What starts as small favors soon turns into full trust. Guards protect Andy, not because they like him, but because they need him. His cell becomes an unofficial office, where men in uniform come quietly for help they can't get outside the walls. Warden Norton notices this value and pulls Andy closer. Under the cover of Bible verses and discipline, the warden runs a massive corruption scheme using prison labor and stolen money. Andy is forced to manage it all, creating fake accounts and identities, especially one named Randall Stevens. Andy knows the truth. This knowledge keeps him alive, but it also keeps him trapped. Despite the danger, Andy never stops working on the one thing that matters most to him, the library. He writes letters to the state every week for years, asking for funds. They ignore him, so he writes twice a week, then 3 times. Finally, boxes of books arrive, along with a small check. Andy smiles, knowing persistence can break even stone walls. One afternoon, Andy does something unforgettable. He locks himself inside the warden's office and plays an opera record over the prison loudspeakers. For a few minutes, Shawshank freezes. Prisoners stop working. Guards stop shouting. No one understands the words, but everyone understands the feeling: freedom. Andy is punished with solitary confinement for 2 weeks. Yet when he returns, he tells Red that those weeks were the easiest time he ever did. Because hope was with him. Hope, however, is dangerous in Shawshank. A new inmate named Tommy Williams arrives years later. During a casual conversation, Tommy reveals that he once knew a criminal who bragged about killing a banker's wife and her lover, a crime Andy was convicted for. Andy finally sees daylight, proof, truth, freedom. Andy brings this to Warden Norton, believing justice will prevail. Instead, the warden panics. If Andy is freed, the corruption ends. Norton orders Tommy killed and throws Andy into solitary confinement again, crushing his last legal hope. When Andy returns from isolation, something is different. He is calm to calm. He gives Red instructions, strange, specific instructions, about a hayfield near Buxton. Red senses danger but says nothing. The next morning, Andy Dufresne is gone. The guards search the prison in panic when Andy Dufresne is nowhere to be found. His bed is neatly made, his shoes polished, his cell perfectly quiet. Warden Norton storms into Andy's cell, convinced this is some kind of trick. In a burst of rage, he throws a rock at the poster on Andy's wall. The paper tears open, revealing the impossible, a tunnel carved deep into solid stone. For nearly 19 years, Andy has been digging that tunnel with a tiny rock hammer, hiding the damage behind posters that changed as time passed. That night, Andy crawled through the tunnel he built inch by inch, emerging into a sewage pipe. He crawled through filth and darkness for hundreds of yards until the pipe finally opened into the river. As rain pours from the sky, Andy steps into freedom, arms raised, reborn. Outside the prison, Andy becomes Randall Stevens for real. He walks into banks with calm confidence, withdrawing every cent of the money Warden Norton had stolen over the years. At the same time, Andy mails detailed evidence of Shawshank's corruption to newspapers and authorities, exposing illegal labor, bribery, and murder. The system collapses fast. Police swarm the prison. Captain Hadley is arrested, screaming in disbelief. As officers approach the warden's office, Norton locks the door, opens his Bible, and finally sees the truth hidden inside: Andy's records, perfectly arranged. Unable to face justice, Warden Norton ends his life as the law closes in. Time passes, Shawshank changes, but Red remains. After decades behind bars, Red finally faces the parole board again. This time, he speaks honestly, without excuses or rehearsed words. He is granted parole. Freedom is overwhelming. Red struggles outside, haunted by routines and walls that no longer exist. Standing where his old friend Brooks once stood, Red considers giving up. Then he remembers Andy's words about hope and the promise he made. Red travels to Buxton. In a quiet hayfield beneath an old oak tree, he finds a small black box buried in the soil. Inside is money and a letter from Andy. The letter invites Red to come find him, not as a prisoner, but as a friend. The final moments take place on a bright Mexican shore in Zihuatanejo. Andy is repairing a boat, Free and smiling, Red walks toward him across the sand. The two men embrace without words, to survivors who refuse to let the world break them. The story ends not with escape, but with peace. Hope won. Freedom does not arrive all at once. Sometimes it comes quietly, carrying weight instead of celebration. When Andy Dufresne and Red reunite on the shores of Zihuatanejo, the ocean stretches endlessly in front of them. The sun is warm, the air clean, and for the first time in decades, there are no walls behind them. Yet neither man mistakes this moment for an ending. They both understand something unspoken. Survival was only the first chapter. Andy has dreamed of this place for years, but dreams are mercifully simple. Reality is not. At night, he still wakes before dawn, his body trained by prison bells that no longer exist. The sound of waves sometimes turns into echoes of iron doors in his mind. Freedom, he learns, does not erase memory. It challenges it. Red struggles even more. Inside Shawshank, every step was controlled, every decision made for him. Outside, the world feels too wide, too fast. He hesitates before speaking, before choosing, before resting. He carries Shawshank with him, not in chains, but in habits. Andy notices this and never pushes. He knows that healing has no schedule. They start small, and he repairs boats near the shore, using his hands to fix what time and water have broken. Wood responds honestly. Split grain can be mended, rot can be replaced. Unlike people, broken boats do not pretend they are whole. The work calms him. It reminds him that damage does not always mean defeat. Red helps when he can, slowly finding purpose again. For the first time in his life, his days are not counted. There is no parole board, no routine, no fear of punishment for existing. And yet, peace feels unfamiliar, almost suspicious. Months pass, and he avoids attention. He uses the money he took not to build luxury, but distance. He understands systems too well to trust them blindly. The world beyond Shawshank is larger, but it is not cleaner. Corruption did not end with one prison, it merely learned to hide better. One evening, a letter arrives with no return address. Inside, a single sentence is written in careful ink. Some prisons don't have walls, and he reads it twice. He does not panic. He does not speak. He understands immediately what it means. Shawshank was exposed, but Shawshank was not unique. There are other places, other men, other systems feeding on silence and obedience. Andy knows this because he once made such a system work, not by choice, but by survival. Red notices the change, and he becomes quieter, more focused. He begins writing again, not letters asking for books, not appeals for mercy, but observations, patterns, methods. He writes about how institutions protect themselves, how power reshapes morality, how rules become weapons when no one is watching. Red reads the pages reluctantly. This is dangerous, he says. And he smiles faintly. So was hope, he replies. And he is not interested in revenge. He never was. What drives him now is something colder and more patient, accountability. He knows how long it takes for truth to matter. He knows systems rarely collapse from one loud accusation. They erode when details accumulate. He writes anonymously. The manuscript circulates quietly at first. Journalists, reform advocates, lawyers who recognize truth when they see it. It does not name Shawshank. It does not name Andy. It names behaviors, incentives, loopholes. It teaches readers how abuse hides behind policy. The reaction is slow, then unstoppable. Prison reform debates reignite. Old cases are reopened. Oversight committees appear where none existed before. Andy watches from a distance, knowing better than to believe in instant change. Progress, he knows, moves like water through stone, slow, persistent, inevitable. Red changes too. He begins talking, really talking, about Shawshank. Not with anger, but honesty. He no longer edits himself to sound worthy of forgiveness. He speaks about fear, complicity, regret. People listen, because he does not ask them to admire him. One night, sitting by the ocean, Red asks Andy a question he has carried for years. Why didn't you give up, after Tommy, after Solitary? After all of it, Andy watches the waves. Because giving up would have meant they were right, he says. And they never were. Andy understands something most people never learn. Institutions depend on your belief in their permanence. The moment you stop believing they are unbreakable, they begin to fail. Years pass. Andy's writing fades from headlines, but not from influence. Laws shift quietly, training manuals change language. Oversight grows sharper, not perfect, never perfect, but better. Andy never claims credit. He fixes boats, he reads, he listens, he lives. Red, once afraid of open space, begins to embrace it. He travels. He laughs more easily. One day, he tells Andy something simple and profound. I'm not afraid of tomorrow anymore. Andy nods. That was always the goal. Far away, in a prison library rebuilt with public funding, a young inmate reads a book without knowing who wrote it. He reads about dignity, restraint, and hope not as emotion, but discipline. The book does not promise freedom, it promises clarity. On the final page, a sentence is underlined. Hope is not a feeling. It is a decision you make every day. The story does not end on the beach. It continues quietly, in policies rewritten, in men treated slightly more humanely, in systems forced to look at themselves. Shawshank fell not because one man escaped, but because one man refused to forget what he saw. And that is the most dangerous